The typhoon, however, decides that it's gonna break for just a moment. Because Joe and Patricia have enough time to stand up, look deep into each other's eyes, not get tossed around a single time like they have been this entire time. They share a kiss, and it's not just a peck, it is a deep, passionate kiss that goes on for like a solid 5 seconds, if not longer. And then, they break away. They're very happy. Both of them are. And I was like, oh, it's so nice for the typhoon to just let them have this moment and be like, you know what? We need to give them. We have to stop for love, ladies and gentlemen. We can attack this boat all we want, but we can't attack them for love. That's not allowed. Like we gotta wait for love. So credit to the sentient typhoon here that knows about love. What's poppin', y'all? Welcome to Post Finale. I'm your host, Ankit Madhira. I'm an actor and a musician who hasn't seen a lot of films, so to make my friends happy and potentially provide a new perspective on some popular films, I'm on a quest to change that. I'm not on this quest alone, however. This week, I am once again joined by Will Padilla, the host of 1980s Now. Will, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm great, and it's great to be back. I look forward to not only talking about the conclusion of the film, but having you find out how your, predictions so far actually pan out.
Yeah, so my predictions right now, in case anyone is, catching up or, it's been a week. For listeners, it's been a week. For Will and I, it's been a very fun 10 minutes. I filled up my water bottle. We had a fun conversation and we're back.
Yes.
So where I'm at in terms of my prediction is that Joe at this point is going to end up with Patricia. And what is going to happen is that he's going to get all the way to the edge of this volcano, but he's going to find out along the way that he's not actually dying. And so then he's like, okay, I'm not actually dying. I'm not going to jump. I'm not quite sure how he's getting out of jumping into the volcano. I haven't put that together, but I feel like one of the ponies is going to jump, but he's not jumping into the volcano. That isn't happening. And he's going to end up with Patricia, and they're going to live happily ever after. Now, at the same time, at the last episode, we found out that there's a typhoon coming, which means that the boat ain't surviving. This boat is no longer going to be part of the plot, is my guess. Pretty quick here. Like, it's going to go bye-bye very soon. At least this is what I am assuming we will find out. But before we get more into what's going on with this typhoon and what's going on with my predictions and how right or wrong I may be, Will, I have a question for you. Now, last time I asked you what your background on the film was and everything like that. Now, I know you're not an actor, but if you were to play a character in this film, who would you want to play? And now that I've seen the entire film, you can pick anybody from the whole film.
Okay, yeah. Now, yeah, what you don't know is actually I do have a background in theater. Acting was probably the first thing I tried to do.
Oh, the things you learn.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Like yourself, I was a young person aspiring to be. I wanted to act, I wanted to write, I wanted to compose, and I got to do those things in New York for a few years before I thought I had to grow up. I was encouraged to get a real job and do all those things, and I sadly I listened. My word to you is I'll be Ankit from the future, traveling back in time. Don't do that. Don't do that. Continue, much like I think the message of this film, and I'm glad you decided to talk to me about it is about following your dreams and staying the course, as we've talked about. And I didn't do that, which is why many years later now, doing the podcast and my podcast and talking to you is about getting back to pursuing some sort of creative path for myself, because you can't suppress that energy. If you're a person like yourself, a musician, actor, you want to create, you have this desire, you know how it is. When you can't do that, you feel kind of sick about it, like soul sick, kind of like, what Patricia says to Joe.
Yeah.
And I felt like that. And so that's why I do the podcast now, gratefully. So, but that said, thinking about it, I couldn't possibly be Tom Hanks. I couldn't compete with I don't have the charm that he has. I
I
think maybe
think
I
you do. Don't sell yourself short.
oh, I think what I'd rather do, and this is a character we're going to see in a little while, is bury myself under makeup and play Nathan Lane's character. He's a very small part in the film, where he is the Waponi Wu who greets them coming to the island. Sort of really over the top, ridiculous character. I think you could probably hide me in there, and I could do that.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, I had a
Be fun.
similar thought. I was like, Tom Hanks is beautiful in this film. I don't want to touch that. Like, don't get me wrong. I'd love to play that role. Just, it's not the role that I would want to play in this film, just because he does such a good job. And everybody in this film does a really good job. I want to play the tribe chief who we see
Yeah.
later.
Yes. Another
He
great
is
one.
my favorite character in the whole film.
Hmm.
And we'll get to why. But
Yeah.
he is fantastic. So, where we're at currently, we've just been told that a typhoon is coming in. And it is now cloudy and foggy and typhoony. And not Pat, Patricia is standing on the sail like a badass. And Joe asks if he can help in any way. She tells him to tie up the sail as you do when there's a storm coming in so that, you don't get blown off course is my assumption, and you save the sails and they don't get tattered and ruined because you're just at the mercy of the waves at that point. Like, you're not actually sailing. So makes sense. Patricia tells Mike to tell Tony to take them into the wind and keep them into the wind. Don't know why you would do this, but I don't sail. So sure, I'm gonna assume that this is accurate.
And I wonder if
Joe's
it's that. I wonder if these are even metaphors for how to face, adversity. Going into the
oh
wind versus, batten down the hatches. But again, it's about staying the course. And I keep saying this, and as we're going to see in a moment, it doesn't work out for the Tweedledee. But I bet you there's some kind of bigger meaning to it.
No, and I think it is true. Like, it's that thing of like, hey, stay the course. Like, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot. No matter what you're trying to do, life just sometimes hits you really hard. And it's those, like, life challenges. Like, when you're 17, 18, the challenges are trying to get into university, trying to decide what you're doing after high school. And that's not necessarily, like, don't get me wrong, it's a very big challenge at that time, but then, like, as you grow up, like, different challenges are going to arise, and some of them are going to be challenges that you can control pretty easily and take care of pretty easily, and some are going to be things that completely just throw your world into a full whirlwind. And you have two options about it. It's either allow yourself to get caught up in the whirlwind, or just be like, okay, cool. And this is what I always say, and like my mentality a bit now is, if something happens, and like whatever the emotion may be, if you're sad about it, if you're angry about it, if you're upset about it, allow yourself the time to feel those emotions. Don't negate those feelings. Allow yourself to feel that and experience that, because that is important for you to experience. But then after you've experienced it, let's put our brains together, and you and whoever is there in your life at that moment in time that you trust to be there to maybe help you, figure out, how do we make the best moving forward? Like, I didn't plan for this. How can I make the best of this situation? Like, it's not necessarily what I want to happen, but like at the end of the day, it's happening to me one way or another. I'm pretty sure that they didn't ask for a typhoon to come around. Like, they weren't sitting there on the boat being like, what sounds like a lot of fun right now? It's been a pretty dull trip. I think we need a typhoon to just spice up life. No, nobody wants to be on a sailboat in a typhoon. Like, that sounds terrible. If anyone's confused on what a typhoon is, it's a hurricane. So it's just in the Pacific, they're called typhoons. In the Atlantic, they're called a hurricane. I think it's because of like which way the wind is circulating. I don't fully know. I think it's typhoons like spin counterclockwise and hurricanes spin clockwise.
You got me. I have no
I
idea.
don't know. But like, I know that they're generally the same thing. Like, at the end of the day, they're both like super strong winds, super strong rain. There you go.
Yeah.
Haha.
But
Based on where you are in the world difference. But that's it.
I think this movie is consistent with your philosophy because you make me realize that ever after Joe gets the diagnosis, he makes these decisions that keep him on the path, and he keeps being thrown little challenges. And some folks, ascribe to this philosophy. It's a spiritual one more than a religious one, but this idea, and some folks could probably find this in their religion, the same idea, that you get these little challenges, and if you decide to continue the course, though, the universe helps you get there. But the universe will throw you another little challenge. But Joe gets this diagnosis, and he keeps making decisions to keep him on the path towards being as courageous as he can, sacrificing himself on behalf of these people. And Dee Dee sort of throws him. She's terrified of him all of a sudden when he tells her the truth. So that's a little setback. All these little setbacks, and we learn about Patricia in this moment. She's like that too. She agreed to take him to the island. Now they could turn back, maybe it's safer waters and weather, but no. She says, let's make the adjustments necessary to keep on this path. And as we'll see in just a moment, they get thrown another curveball, but let's adjust again.
Let's adjust. So Joe says that there's no wind because, we're trying to go into the wind. And she just goes, there will be. And I was like, oh, that's not ominous at all. No. It isn't. I don't know what you're talking about. So Patricia says everything's going to be all right. Like you said, close the hatches. The sails are down. They're ahead of the game. They're doing everything they can to plan ahead, which is what you can do. You can try your best to plan ahead. And we hear the thunder, and Joe's like, what is a typhoon? And I love that she's just like, oh, Joe, I think you're gonna find out.
Yeah.
And guess what? He finds out. We see massive waves. There's a ton of wind, and the boat is getting hammered. The poor guys up on the steering wheel are getting tossed around. They're trying their best to stand up. It's going very poorly. I feel bad for the two of them. So, Mike and Tony doing a great job. Patricia's on the radio. She's like, Mayday, latitude 10 degrees, 8 minutes south, longitude approximately 150 degrees, 18 minutes west. If anyone knows where that is in the Pacific, let us know. I don't know. I tried looking it up. I couldn't find it very well. You needed more information, and I didn't know how it worked because I've never tried. So if anyone out there is listening and understands where this might be, I'm curious. So they are in severe distress, if that wasn't clear with the massive waves. Patricia tells Joe not to go up on deck, but, hey, go check on Dagmar down in the engine room. Joe goes and checks on Dagmar, and Dagmar says, things look good, but, she'll stay with it. Take care of Patricia. And I wrote down two things, and I was like, cool. Considering that she's having to hold things together in the engine room, I don't think things are going that well. And two, doesn't give me hope that Tony, Mike, or Dagmar are surviving. And, again, not ominous at all. I don't know what you're talking about. No type of foreshadowing. No. So just then, Mike or Tony, I don't know which one, says that the main boom doesn't look secure, and it looks like it's going to bust loose. Patricia puts on a coat. She heads out with the rope to save her boat. And again, I really appreciate this. I like how she's like, no, this is my boat. I'm going to do everything I can to save it. Joe follows her out there. Patricia picks up Joe in the middle of all of this chaos and, of being flown around and tossed around like a rubber duck in a tub. And, like when you're in a tub as a little kid and you're splashing all the water around, that duck doesn't stand a chance. That's what this boat is like. Just for context of what's going on. The typhoon, however, decides that it's going to break for just a moment because Joe and Patricia have enough time to stand up, look deep into each other's eyes, not get tossed around a single time like they have been this entire time. They share a kiss, and it's not just a peck, it is a deep, passionate kiss that goes on for like a solid 5 seconds, if not longer. And then, they break away. They're very happy. Both of them are. And I was like, oh, it's so nice for the Typhoon to just let them have this moment and be like, you know what? We need to give them. We have to stop for love, ladies and gentlemen. We can attack this boat all we want, but we can't attack them for love. That's not allowed. Like we gotta wait for love. So credit to the sentient Typhoon here that knows about love, and they're very happy. But then, just then, because Patricia failed to actually do her job and tie down the big boom, and instead decided that now was the right time to kiss Joe instead of, tying down the big boom, which is what she was warned about, she gets knocked by the big boom into the water. And I'm not going to lie, I laughed out loud when it happened.
So, yeah, you set up the Typhoon like it was going to give them a break, but really was setting them up to play a really terrible practical joke. Come on, kiss, kiss, kiss. Psych! Boom!
It was great. It was fantastic. Yeah. Like I was like, why are you kissing? Of all times, now is the time to, oh, no. The Typhoon was just creating its own entertainment. I respect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Typhoon was like, look, there aren't many boats caught in me right now. So I'm going to enjoy this moment.
Talking to the other Typhoons. Hey, check this out. Look what I'm about to do to these two fools.
Yeah. They got no idea what's coming. It's like, wait, why are you giving them a break? No. Just watch. Like, give me 30 seconds. Like, it's going to be great. Beautiful moment. Patricia's not moving. She is completely conked out. And Joe decides to jump into the water to try to save her. He jumps in, dives deep down. I'm assuming deep. But he's struggling to find her. Again, beautiful soundtrack at this moment. Absolutely gorgeous soundtrack at this moment. He finds her finally after his third dive in and brings her back to the surface. However, they're far away from the boat. And just then, the boat gets hit by lightning. It splits in two and starts to sink.
Yeah.
I was also surprised the boat didn't catch on fire, with the lightning and all. Like, I would have assumed that there would have been a fire. Like, yes, there's a lot of rain, but like lightning also does, like, if it strikes something, there's usually like a fire that starts. And, you see that happen a lot, at least in movies. I think it happens in real life as well. Like, it conducts electricity. So, lightning has caused forest fires and things like that before, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not very well versed on it, but I was surprised that there wasn't fire. But I was like, you know what? Might have been a budget thing. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it seemed so over the top and kind of fake. I mean, it looks like clearly a model that suddenly just splits in two. But
yeah,
I think more importantly, though, did you notice the shape of the lightning bolt?
I just saw a lightning bolt.
It was the same shape that we've been seeing throughout the movie, on the volcano, on the logo, on the wall. Yeah.
Okay. That's where you were saying, you know what? I should have put together when you said in the last episode that, hey, you're going to see the lightning bolt again. I should have put together that it was the lightning bolt.
The lightning bolt. Yeah. Yeah. It goes by so quickly, but that's what it is.
Very interesting. Very fun. Very fun. I like how it's the same shape. Very nice. So it starts sinking, and I was like, oh, look, Trunk Ex Machina. It appears right next to Joe and an unconscious Patricia. And Joe manages to swim over and at least reach this trunk, and it helps keep them afloat. And I'm assuming he like hoists Patricia up onto the thing, because like, otherwise he's having to hold her the whole time. So like he's holding onto the edge, he hoists her up. And I was just like, the boat sank incredibly quickly. I mean, like, I don't know how fast a boat that's split in two is gonna sink.
Right.
But like, it was very fast.
Yeah. James Cameron knows. I bet you James Cameron knows.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either.
No. Obviously it's a much different ship. Yeah, I think this is one of those things. It's kind of just, there's so many sort of suspension of disbelief type moments in this film that we have to just accept, and this is just one of them.
Honestly, I was just like, yeah, cool. Like the boat sank. I knew that this was coming. Let's move on. Like I'm less interested in the boat. Like I don't really care about it. Oh, look, it sank quickly.
Yeah. It's like, that's not what it's about. Let's just get the boat out of the story. Let's get back to these two folks.
Yeah, what's going on here? So the storm has calmed and Joe wakes up. He and Patricia are both okay, and he finds the other two crates, or two more crates, and he brings them over. And I thought it was two, ends up being three. He has four of these suitcases all together, and
Right.
he uses the rope to tie them all together, and he creates a raft. And my initial thought was, oh, this is why he was so ready for Castaway. It's because
Yeah.
it's already happened once. He was prepared and knew how to survive.
Yeah. There's probably online some fan edit that somebody put these two movies together, because it
Oh,
does give you those vibes. Yeah.
yeah. My initial thought was, look, Tom Hanks in his element. I think the first movie that I watched with Tom Hanks in it was Castaway.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
It may have been Toy Story, but I didn't know like Tom Hanks was the
Yeah.
voice of Woody at the time. Like, you know.
Right.
So it may have been Toy Story, but the first movie that I remember watching that Tom Hanks is in is Castaway. I remember watching it in the sense that my family was watching it and I was in the room. But I didn't like really like clock the film much. I think like the first one that like I properly like understood who Tom Hanks was and like enjoyed the film might have been Catch Me If You Can.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you if there's one you've seen in its entirety that you got a better sense of him.
Well,
Okay.
like
Yeah,
I've now seen like Castaway in its entirety, like after growing up as well. But like my earliest just like recollection of Tom Hanks in a film is Castaway.
yeah.
But then like, you know, I was in the room, I was like, I don't know, 5, 6, my family was watching it, and so I was there, but like not fully paying attention and probably didn't
That
fully
wouldn't hold a
understand what
5 or
was going
6 year
on.
old's attention. Certainly.
No,
That
like
movie was kind of boring.
I
I thought.
was sitting there playing with my toys, and like when I watched it like years later, I was like, oh yeah, like I know certain bits of this film because like, you know, I would clock in every now and again and be like, what's happening on the TV?
Right.
So, but like that's just my earliest remembrance of Tom Hanks. But I think the first one that like I was like, oh, like cool, it's Tom Hanks was probably Catch Me If You Can. I think I watched that when I was like 9, 10, maybe.
Okay.
I think I don't fully remember. I don't remember when that film came out either. So, yeah. Early
Neither do I.
2000s is all I know. I know it came
Okay.
out
Yeah.
early 2000s. But yeah. So anyway, the typhoon has passed and they have survived, obviously. And Joe starts digging around his luggage and
You know,
he
and
finds
just to be clear, you said Patricia's okay, but she's still unconscious.
Oh no, she's completely unconscious. She's
Right.
breathing but unconscious.
Right.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. And he's digging through his luggage. He finds this violin bar set that he bought.
Right.
And I was like, huh, okay. And at first I was like, why is he pouring alcohol into Trisha's mouth? Like, is he trying to wake her up? Like,
Oh, you're like, after all this time, he turns out to be a shady dude. He's got a
Yeah.
woman unconscious and he's looking her up.
I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And then I was like, oh wait, it's probably water. But like, because when they sold it to him as like, hey, there's liquor in this violin case, and so I was like, oh, like there's liquor. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't sell it to him saying that there's water in the violin case.
Yeah. He did say it was a bar. You're right. Yeah.
And so I was like, why? Also, alcohol technically dehydrates someone. So like, why is he giving her alcohol? Like this, it's not matching. I don't want to understand. Turns out it is water, ladies and gentlemen. So
Yeah, it's like Perrier or something in one of those fancy glass bottles.
yeah. It's
Moving on.
sparkling water. So he turns on the radio, which he also digs out, and gets it going and gets a signal. And he manages to get the signal, and he gets some music playing. And it's the song that's like da 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 ba do ba da, and that's all I'm gonna say. Otherwise, copyright. But like, it's like that song. And it's like, you know, it's a fun little time, and we see Joe proceed to have a lovely dance party by himself up on this raft that he has made while Patricia's just passed out. And I put in here, it's like, I like how all of these shots in this whole dance sequence, you never see his feet.
Hmm. Why do you think that is?
It's probably for the shooting purposes, because instead of trying to show that he's dancing on the luggage, if they can show that he's dancing, they can just film it and like he can just be standing on the ground.
Oh, I
Um
see. Because
and
it'd be
like
harder to dance on floating luggage, maybe.
yeah, and it's harder to show that, and like he'll probably fall and like whatnot, and like it's probably just significantly easier to just change the camera angle to be looking up at him or like directly at him rather than showing his feet. So like if you look, I think the most you ever see is like maybe his knee, and you never really see
Hmm.
like below his knee on any of these shots. So that's probably the reason that they did it that way.
Hmm. Didn't notice that. I
Yeah.
did notice, I think, though, and this isn't, I didn't go back and check the scene when he goes shopping, but I was alluding to this on the last episode that unlike other shopping sprees in 80s movies, and it came out in 1990, his shopping turns out to be purposeful. Now, he couldn't have planned it, but it does seem through this scene and at the end of the movie too, we're going to see it's going to finish sort of this what I'm suggesting off here is that I think he uses everything he buys. I think everything winds up having a purpose, keeping him alive or entertained or otherwise during this, this montage and again at the end of the film.
Sure. Let me pull up my notes real quick of my last time because I have the items that he bought.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the items that he bought that were specifically mentioned, other than the suitcases, which we've already seen him use for the raft,
Right.
we see him buy a Swiss Army knife, which I don't think we've seen that come up yet. But
Okay. I
I'm
have to think
guessing
about
he
that.
probably used that for like, the rope and like to
Right.
cut rope
When he
maybe and
lashed the
things like
ropes.
that.
Right, right.
When he lashed the rope together, so I'll give him that one. We see the World Band travel radio. We see that being used. Shaving kit, so we'll see if that gets used. We have 2 Coleman lanterns. We'll see if they come up. The
Right.
violin case bar and a
Yep.
red
Just
and white umbrella.
right.
Those are the specific items that we are told about. Oh, he does also, buy golf clubs.
Mm-hmm.
He does buy
Oh,
some
right.
golf clubs, and that is everything that he bought, other than the luggage. So we'll see if the other items come up. But
Okay.
those are the specifics of what he has bought. So
Good. I'm glad you have that.
yeah. I do take the diligent notes. So if there's one thing I'm good at, it's that. So, you know, he then is using the shaving kit. So there we go. And the red umbrella is used to shade Patricia from the sun. So
Right.
far, everything has been used, except for, I think it's just the 2 Coleman lanterns, which
Right.
we'll just say it now. Like you see it, they use them kind of throughout as they are sitting on this raft, and it's nighttime is when they pull out the lanterns. Obviously, we've seen the umbrella. We're assuming he uses the Swiss Army knife. He's used the radio. He's used the shaving kit, and he's used the violin case bar. The only thing we haven't seen him use are the golf clubs. And one thing, it's now night, and he's playing the ukulele. Patricia's still passed out, but now she's on her stomach. Did he flip her over?
I don't know if you're unconscious. Would you roll yourself over? That's a good point. I don't know.
Because
Maybe to
she's
protect
on
her from
her
the sun
back.
further. Yeah.
Because she's on her
Maybe.
back earlier,
Right.
but now she's on her stomach. So, like, I don't know. Because, like, anything that I've ever seen in film is that if you are unconscious, you're not gonna flip over yourself. Maybe you do,
Yeah.
maybe you don't. I don't know.
I could see he's taken so much care to protect her from the sun and keep her alive. I could see that he maybe flip her to keep her from, burning on one side too much. I know he's got the umbrella over her and this cloth sort of over her, but maybe there's a blanket on her. But maybe, yeah, it could be that he flipped her.
My assumption is that he flipped her. And Joe is then, singing about a cowboy under a moon. And he's under the
Yep.
moon. And hey, look at that. He's now playing putt putt and using the golf clubs and playing some
Yep.
golf. At least until it gets blown away.
Yeah, that's
And
another silly moment. Yeah.
yeah, it was just beautiful. And this is when I was like, oh wow, Patricia got knocked out bad because like she's still not coming to. She's still not coming around. Joe continues to keep giving her water, keeping her alive, just a little bit. He's not giving her too much water at once, like he's doing that. And I was like, how is he getting food? How is he getting water? And then one night, Joe wakes up and he sees all the constellations, but he's hallucinating a bit now as well. And I was like, there's the hints of dehydration and the lack of food that I was just questioning. And we see a beautiful shot of the sun rising. And then I was like, wait, no, that might be the moon. It's just really massive for some reason. It might be the moon. Yeah, it ends up being the moon. Joe is struggling to stand up. It's a very large, very fake moon, but a beautiful shot. Really works for this film. I think it's beautiful. At one moment, if you pause it at the right moment, it does look like Joe is holding up the moon because he has his arms up in the air.
Yes.
Beautifully, beautifully done. Beautiful shot there.
And John
And
Patrick Shanley seems to have something for the moon. I've never dug into why or what it is, but it shows up in a lot of his works. As you mentioned, the Cowboy song has a moon reference in it.
yeah.
Shanley wrote that song. We have the moon there. Shanley wrote the movie Moonstruck. And also, when I was acting
Wait,
as a
he
young
wrote
person,
Moonstruck?
he wrote Moonstruck as well.
I did Moonstruck on this show.
Is that
Earlier.
right? Okay.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. A fantastic
Yeah.
film.
Yeah. And he also, some short plays that I did when I was younger, another one was set in New York and a lot of references to the moon. So it plays a role in a lot of his works.
Interesting. Very fun. I don't know. I mean, the moon is a beautiful storytelling element. There's a lot of cultures that connect to the moon, and we followed the lunar calendar here in India, and you know, all of that. So, there's a lot of that. Like Hinduism follows the lunar calendar, and that's why a lot of people use the moon originally. And it wasn't until I don't know who brought it along until like we switched to the solar calendar. But like a lot of ancient cultures would use the moon as their calendar rather than the sun.
Right.
Because the moon was consistent, it was always a 28-day cycle.
Yeah. It's probably the Romans or the Greeks, right? But because we're on the Julian calendar, I think that's for Julius Caesar began in that era.
Yeah. Sure, that sounds right. That's one of the history things.
This isn't a history podcast, even though last time you gave me a history lesson.
I mean, like, look, it's just that I like history. Like, this isn't a history podcast. This is a silly film comedy podcast. But we just talk a lot about history sometimes. So, yeah, interesting. But there we go. It's a beautiful, beautiful shot. And Joe reaches out to God, thanking him for his life. And, he forgot how big, but he trails off and he just says, thank you. Thank you for my life.
Yeah. What do you think he's saying is big in that moment? Because he doesn't finish.
I think he's trying to say, like, I forgot how big the world is and how much there is that you've given us and how much there is to explore and to experience. Because for so long, he was just doing that mundane life and not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but like he didn't have anything. It was just go to work, go home, go to work, go home. It wasn't like he was seeing friends. It wasn't like he was seeing family. Like there was no social interaction at all for him pretty much for multiple years, it seemed like. So I think that's what he was saying. What do you think he was saying?
I think more or less you're right. Yeah, it's funny because when I rewatched it before I talked to you, I was certain he said how big the moon is, but it seems more interesting that he trails off. But I think you're right about how much he has that he hasn't experienced. Because he was spending all of his days in that small office on a small island. We don't even know if when he flew to L.A., that might have been the first time he was on an airplane. It's probably easy. I think it's interesting again with this idea that, and maybe this isn't important or interesting to you, but that he says, "Dear God, whose name I do not know." So it's not even important that he's talking about a specific God. It's just that he knows there's something bigger than him
Yeah.
that's been, providing for him, I guess.
Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, I just believe like in this moment, right? Maybe he didn't believe it before, maybe he believes it now. We
Right.
don't know. He's just reaching out to this higher entity per se that he believes is there in this moment. And the easiest way for people to think about higher entities is God. Like that's why religion is there.
Right.
Like religion is completely made up by humans. No other species has gods to the best of our knowledge.
No, animals aren't worshiping a god.
I mean, they
I
might be.
guess
We
we
just
do.
might not
Yeah,
know.
we
I
don't
mean,
know.
like, I don't
I
know.
don't speak cat. Maybe that cat earlier on in the film was praying.
Yeah, it's very
Meow.
possible.
Yes,
Yeah,
we don't know.
the cat was like, I'm praying to God, and that's why I'm in this restaurant.
Yeah.
I'm praying for food. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's why dogs, like, I don't know, maybe they're just like, oh, like I'm praying for food. That's why I'm always like by the table when you're trying to eat, even though you've already fed me. Like, I want your food. Like,
Yes.
I'm praying that, like, there's gonna
Oh, they're
be
not
something to
begging; they're
drop.
praying.
No, they're praying for food.
Okay, there we go.
So he drops onto the luggage, and it's now Patricia's turn to wake him up. And I was like, oh, look, Patricia's okay. I knew that she was going to be okay. I wasn't worried about her not being okay. She starts giving Joe the water, and Joe says, no, the water's for you. And she's like, did you drink any, like, kind of like chastising him of like, Joe, you're so silly. Like, what are you doing here? Like, come on, like, drink the water.
Yeah,
And
but it is. It's. I mean, look. It says a lot about his character, right? That he cared so much about her first. It was more important that she survived than he survived.
he was like, it's fine. I'm going to die anyway. Like, whatever happens to me happens to me. But like, if I can save her life, I can save her life. So he tells her that the yacht went down with the lightning. So did Dagmar and the boys. She's obviously upset about this, but, understands that there's nothing that she can do. And, oh, look, they managed to reach Waponi Island. And the Waponis see them on the trunks. And I'm like, well, that's convenient that the currents just took them straight there. It's like the ocean was like, all right, like, look, hey, we're gonna ruin your ship. However, we understand that you have bought some items, Joe, and we haven't seen you use them. So we're going to just make your life a little bit difficult so that you can use the items that you bought. But don't worry, we'll still get you to your destination. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Very convenient of these ocean currents. Very, very kind of them as well to just help them out. So the Waponis see them on the water, and they head out to receive Patricia and Joe. They are thrilled, they are happy, and they're extremely happy when he reveals that he is Joe Banks. And I was like, they are interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes, and now you start to see all these cultures that you told us about on the last episode. The impact of all these, the influence of all these cultures on this interesting tribe of people.
yeah, by no means, ladies and gentlemen, ask me which portions of what they're doing is influenced by what culture, because I'm not from those cultures. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what might be influenced from those cultures, but we can assume that it was the four cultures that brought together whatever they're doing in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah. I don't know if you know anything about the cultures.
Well, the only thing I guess I catch they're doing an instrumental. This is getting a little head though, but just only slightly so. Obviously, the look is kind of Polynesian, although the fact that their clothing, a lot of it's made out of crushed orange soda cans, which we
Yeah.
talked about. That's their favorite for some reason. But they use them practically for different things in their. They fashion the cans into tools and clothing and different things.
But
That's
like,
one thing. And then
how are
yeah.
they getting them?
Yeah, I was thinking that it's got to be Grainamore, right? He's got to be like part of his deal with them. Maybe he's shipping off cargo, ships
Probably. That seems like the most likely answer, but like then how did they get them before Granamore? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't know. We'll
We
have
do
to
hear
ask
them.
the Waponies.
Yes, if only we could. We do hear them singing later on Hava Nagila, which is a Jewish song.
Okay.
So we do get the Hebrew influence there, and they're also doing. I don't know where this the origins of this song is, but they're doing it's like Johnny comes marching in.
Yeah, I have
Uh,
that as well. The underlying entrance music is to the tune of I called it the Ansko marching.
okay.
Because growing up in summer camps, we would sing the Ansko marching, and for anyone that's confused, it's like the Ansko marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. Like
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
kind of the tune, and at least there are multiple versions of that song. That's just the one that I'm familiar with. But I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
no idea what the words are that are being said there. So completely confused by what the words
Right.
are, but that's the tune that is being
Right.
sung. So yeah. So Patricia is also welcomed in as royalty, and it's a massive festival. They are treated like royalty. We see a specific shot of a doll of a man, and I was like, I wonder if this is gonna come back later. I was like, I don't know, but why was it such a specific shot? So Joe asks what it is, and I was like, seriously? All I had to do was hit play and wait another 5 seconds before, I got my answer. Zero suspense. It's apparently
Yep.
the soul of the chief, and the chief is named Toby. Toby has learned English so that he can communicate with the outsiders. And he says that tonight we will have a big feast, and at the end, Joe will climb up to the top and jump into the big woo. So before we get into the big feast and all the preparations that go into it, we're going to take a quick intermission, and then we will be back and see what happens. And I still don't think Joe is jumping into the big woo. So it's not happening. I don't believe it's happening. I'm feeling less confident that it's not gonna happen. But he can't die. Let's put it that way. Even if he jumps in, he's not dying. And if he does die, it would do one of two things. Is one, I would say, well done to the film for just completely breaking the trope. Like we've been saying, they've broken some of these tropes where you're like, oh, he's gonna go do this. Nope, he's gonna go do this. No. It would be fantastic if he just jumps in and dies. That's just the end of the film. Great. I would love it. It would be beautiful. Honestly, there's a small part of me hoping for that. I don't think that's going to happen. But, either that's going to happen or there's going to be some stupid plot, armor that lets him live, and I'm going to be annoyed by it. But we'll figure out what that is in a little bit after we take a quick break. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of Post Finale. I hope you are all enjoying this episode, and if you want to gain access to more bonus content, like access to my notes and access to some of the tier lists that I make and help suggest films and things like that, all of that can be done over at our Patreon, and that can be found at patreon.com/coopforge. So that's patreon.com/CO_OPFORGE. Signing up for any of the tiers gets you different types of bonus content depending on the tier that you sign up for, and a shout out here on the show for every patron that signs up. It really means the world to us, and it helps us grow this show and helps us be able to put the money back into this show to make it a better experience for you, the listeners. That is our entire goal here at Co-op Forge. So thank you all so much if you are considering doing this. Now, if you want to help the show in a non-monetary way, that is fantastic as well. You can do so by just talking about us and sharing it with a friend. Just reach out to a friend and be like, hey, you love movies, or hey, you need an excuse to watch more movies. Check out this show called Post Finale. The host is silly, he's an actor, he's confused most of the time, gets a lot of guesses wrong, but overall it's a lovely time and some interesting discussions about some iconic films. I think you'll really enjoy it. It really does help. And be sure to talk about us on social media and follow us on social media. That really helps out a lot as well. If you're looking for the show, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Post Finale Pod. And then you can also find us at Co-op Forge on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And that's at Co-op Forge at CO_OPFORGE. And we post content not just from Post Finale, but from the other shows here on Co-op Forge as well. So that includes Flip the Scripts and that includes Seattle Across the Pond. So be sure follow both of those channels. Again, it's at Post Finale Pod and at Co-op Forge, CO_OPFORGE. But just thank you so much for listening to this episode. Wherever you are, if you're enjoying the episode, if you're listening on YouTube, please please hit subscribe. It really does help us out. If you're listening on a podcast app, that's great as well. It doesn't matter to us where you're listening. We're just so thankful that you're listening. But if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating. It really does help us out. Please leave a review and hit that follow button. You can also turn on notifications both on YouTube and on the podcast apps just to be notified when new episodes come out. It really does mean a lot that you are all listening to these episodes, and thank you all so much. So let's get back to the episode without further ado. So, we are back, and it is time to get ready for the big feast. So what we have to do first is we have to bathe our guests. The Waponies bathe Joe. They offer perfume and all types of luxuries to Patricia. And, while Patricia is getting beautiful spa treatment and a beautiful, lovely time, Joe is being beaten with sticks, having bananas plastered over his face, smoke blown into his face. I think they're eating his toes, and they put an octopus on his face as well. This doesn't feel like a royal treatment.
Yeah, and they're laughing the whole time they're doing it. It's one of those moments where I said maybe it's just this, they put some sight gags or some funny shtick in here throughout the film. And it's just in here for laughs to break it up. It does seem like the movie does get sillier as it goes on, almost, or at least certainly when it gets to Waponi Woo, because the presentation of these Waponies is really silly. I glanced over, or sort of over Nathan Lane, and I think one of his first, if not his first, film appearance, unrecognizable as this tribesman. That's just very Nathan Lane in his presentation. So it does get sillier and sillier. I wonder if the purpose of this was only just to give us some kind of gags. Really,
it's very possible. I don't know. I mean, I was kind of I don't know. I would have rather seen them treat him nicely, me personally, because
they should be grateful.
Yeah, he's here to save them from the big woo, and to save them because none of them are brave enough to jump into the flames.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But
now you mentioned, Ankit, if I could interrupt you for a moment, you mentioned you'd like to be Chief Toby, but you didn't explain why, and now we've met him.
I will explain why very shortly.
Oh, okay, very good.
Yes. As Chief Toby has a little more to say, that's where I was at this point I'm just Chief Toby seems cool, he seems kind, and then as he has a few more lines coming in, I'm like, yes. So the big woo we notice is very bright and red at the top. Oh, one thing I did miss is that there is a duck sitting on top of the trunks. Joe notices it as well. So here comes the duck again. And I don't know what it's supposed to signify, but I saw a duck and I was like, duck. So the big woo, bright, very red at the top. And we are at some type of festivals, and some sort of storytelling is happening at this feast gathering festival thing. And Patricia asks Toby if they know where Joe is, and he says maybe he ran away, don't want to jump. And just then we hear a horn, and we see Joe dressed in a tuxedo, and he is going out in style if he is going to go out. And I was like, I still don't believe that he's going to. I feel like he's gonna run away with Patricia. It's not gonna happen. He's not actually gonna die. And I did enjoy that they rang the gongs, and they're massive gongs, but they ran the
Right.
gongs by two people flying into them. And I like how Toby is just upset by the stupidity as well. And this is like the start of me really enjoying Toby, where he's just like, why? Like, what are you doing, guys? Like, come on, be better than this.
And
Like,
it's smash cut to them being carried away in stretchers.
yeah, right? And Toby says that, change has come. His people like this soda, and none of his people are willing to jump into the big woo. And so I was like, I'm sorry. Joe has to jump into the big woo because of orange soda. This seems like a crappy deal. And
Uh,
I don't
Never
know.
tried that soda.
Not that specific one. I
Yeah.
enjoy orange soda. Don't get me wrong. Fanta, fantastic. But
Yeah.
like at the same time, I don't know if I like. Well, okay, like I like my life enough to not want to jump into a burning volcano, but I don't know. I haven't been proposed with the proposition of living on a tiny island and saving all of my people. I don't know what I would do in that situation. Maybe I'd pick the orange soda as well. I can't completely fault them, but like I'm saying that like there's not a single soul in a very densely populated island, mind you.
Well, it's interesting to me. Again, it's just sort of just going back to the theme of this film. Joe is, we've already know he's not, he had this scary, he was a fireman and he was very brave and did things without regard for consequences of his own life, saving people. Something happened that shook him up and he couldn't do it anymore. And ever since then, he was afraid of living. But really, more importantly, I guess, the way he lived was because he was afraid of dying. After he finds out he's dying, he starts having this adventure and opening up and experiencing all these things. Conversely, the Waponis are afraid of dying so much so that, even to the extent that if Joe doesn't come along, they're going to die. So they're afraid of dying is keeping them from living. In such a sort of is a sort of extreme example of the the antithesis to how Joe's living his life.
Yeah, definitely.
And much like him, to the joke earlier on, they're stuck on this island, which is what how he started out.
Yeah, they are stuck on an island. So is he. And I do find it interesting that like and that's what fascinates me, right? Is like they're so afraid of dying, yet no one is willing to save literally everyone that they potentially love. No one's willing to put their hand up and say, "You know what? I'm scared of dying, but I would rather, everybody that I love be safe." So
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Nope.
I don't know. Very interesting. So they Toby explains that they traded with Ganamor, the people did, for a hero. And he says that he, as Toby, he must be the hope for the people. That is his job. And it kind of feels like Toby would jump if he wasn't chief. And if he wasn't there to keep the hope for the people and, keep the tribe and like, lift them up. And he's like, the woo calls and none of his people are willing to jump. And he genuinely seems upset with his own people. And this is kind of why I really like Toby. And it's because, like, he is kind of that voice of reason where he is saying that, like, I understand the crappy situation. And it's like, I don't want this to be happening either. Um, but he's also just honest and blunt and straightforward. And that's kind of what I enjoy about him. Is that he's just honest and blunt and straightforward. So,
And he's being played by at the time certainly a well-known actor named Abe Vigoda, who he's even shouted out in the Beastie Boys song, Abe Vigoda. But he was on a TV show in the late 70s. I don't know if it made it into the 80s, called Barney Miller, where he played a detective, perfected this deadpan style that you see as this character. He had a spin-off series as well playing this character, but he is like the epitome of what we know as Abe Vigoda as a character actor in this film, playing sort of again, like you said, very sort of almost deadpan, just it's what it is. It is what it is.
yeah. And I think like that's what I really like about this character, and that's why I would want to play Toby, is because like I enjoy just doing the deadpan. I find that type of comedy really funny, and like
Yeah.
when it works, it works. It doesn't always work, but it works for Toby, and I think it works beautifully. And that's kind of why I wanted to play him. Is like he just has this deadpan of like, okay, like, this is the
Yeah.
case. Fine, you want me to? Fine. Yeah, I'm upset with them too. They suck. Like he's just like,
Yeah.
that's just all he is, and it's fantastic. So he gets up and Joe says that he has no people of his own and he is his only hope for a hero. Toby's like, you know what, I'm gonna call out once more for my people to see if anyone is willing to come forward. Everybody bows their heads, and I take that as they are saying no. The volcano gets angrier, and they're like, the Wu wants the flesh. And Joe stands up and says, take me to the volcano. And so we go. Patricia seems heartbroken, but Joe turns and gives her a thumbs up like he is planning something. So I'm like, ooh, does he have a sneaky plan? Is he going to convince Toby to jump? What's going to happen? How's he going to save himself? Because again, I don't think he's jumping. So Patricia seems to pick up on this. And I was like, wait a minute. Is he going to get the duck that we just saw to jump into the flames? But then
Does that count?
that doesn't make sense because it was very specifically said they needed human flesh. But can the volcano really tell the difference? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe duck flesh is similar to human flesh.
Yeah.
Like, maybe a duck is just a smaller version of a human in the volcano says. I don't know. But I'm like,
They
I'm
both taste like
trying to
chicken.
figure out. Sure. I mean, I
Duck and
don't
human.
know why you know that fact, but sure.
No, things.
I mean, like, we've seen TV shows. So Patricia follows the group and she's trying to catch up to Joe. And, Joe's up at the front of the line. They're hiking up the mountain.
This is another appearance of our
lightning bolt
motif. Yes, the shape of the path now up the volcano is the same as the other times we've seen this pattern. Shape.
There's that pattern again. So,
and I think this is what I said earlier. It was a bit ago when they were on the ship, and she's talking about she's reading that book about the Waponi Woos, and they don't have a great sense of direction. For me, that kind of explains the fact that they don't have a straight up route up the volcano. That it is this circuitous, zigzaggy route. It's not direct.
Yeah, but like that also makes sense to me because like as someone who has done a lot of hiking, like that's the whole reason switchbacks are there, because otherwise you have a super super steep incline potentially. So like I went on a hike called Philmont, which is a scout ranch down in New Mexico, and there is a portion of this hike, and it's like after 10 days of being out in the wilderness, you're walking back down to base camp and you can see the camp at the bottom, and as the crow flies you can get there, and it's like a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles. But because of the series of switchbacks you have to go down, it ends up being like a 6-mile hike or something like crazy like that. And the entire time you can see base camp, where you have a shower, where you have a hot meal you don't have to cook, like you have a cot, like you have amenities, like like you are almost done with this incredible journey. Like I had an amazing time on that trip, but like also like after 10 days of just pure wilderness, it's nice to come back to civilization. So like we're coming back, and we all know that like, all right, we get back, like there was a plan that like, all right, we'll go into town, we'll have like a nice meal at a restaurant, and like at like a famous restaurant or whatever. But this entire way down you're just sitting there like, it's so close yet so far. So like it does make sense a little bit, just because otherwise it would be just a stupidly steep incline potentially.
Right. I see.
Yeah. So the Wu is very angry. Joe asks if there's a ceremony, and Toby's like, no, you just jump in. Like, perfect. Mwah. Love it. And Patricia calls and yells for everyone to stop. She tells Joe she loves him. She has fallen in love with him. She's not sure how it's happened. She has never loved anybody. And she didn't, just say earlier. And I was like, didn't you just say earlier that, like, you love your sister, you love your father? And I'm like, you know what? Different kind of love. But still, like, technically, you do love people. But, like, fine, I'll give it to you. So,
Yeah, I think Joe says, I've never been in love either.
yeah.
So yeah, there. Yeah.
Joe, I believe, we haven't seen him love anything other than
Right.
his ukulele. He loves his ukulele. So she's not sure how she has fallen in love with him. She hasn't even slept with him. And I
Right.
love Toby's eye roll on the side. And this is the moment that I fell in love with Toby. And I was like, that's who I want to play.
Yeah.
Is because Toby's like, oh my God, not this again. Like, come on. Just perfect. So,
And I was wondering if Toby was worried, like, oh no, he's going to change his mind and not jump in because this woman is professing her love.
yeah, like, it kind of gives you that sense, but then it also gives you the sense of, like, Toby's just so fed up with this whole shindig and shebang. He's like, can we just get this over with? Like, I've
seen it all. Yeah, he's over it.
I'm
Everything.
like,
Yeah.
fine, whatever. So Joe's like, can I have a minute? And Toby's like, yeah, sure. And Patricia is like, I love you. And she's like, I can't explain it. My heart's going crazy, but you can't die and just leave her here on this stinking earth without him. And Joe's like, I have to do it. Patricia's like, why? Even the chief doesn't want you to do it. Do you, chief? And I was like, I mean, he probably doesn't want Joe to, like, do it, but he never gets the chance to respond. And we never see him because technically he's off screen. So, like, we don't see his response before Joe's like, no, I've wasted my life and now I'm going to die. And now he has the chance to die like a man and he's going to take it. So Joe tells Patricia that he loves her too, as we alluded to. And he's like, it's great. I'm really glad that I love you. It's a fantastic feeling. But the timing sucks. I gotta go. And then he kisses her on the cheek and then heads up the path. Patricia follows him up, and Joe tells her to go back. And they're standing on the edge of the volcano right now. And I'm like, how are you getting out of this? How are you not going to jump into the volcano? I'm feeling less and less confident about the fact that they're not going to jump into the volcano. And I'm feeling more confident about the fact that they're going to jump in and some stupid plot armor is going to allow them to live and I'm going to be annoyed by it. But Patricia follows him up and she's like, no, don't do this. And Joe's like, no, go back down. Like, don't do this. And Patricia asks Joe to marry her. And then she calls down to Chief Toby. And Joe is confused and says that, like, no, I have to jump into the volcano. And Patricia's like, fine, marry me, and then jump into the volcano. And Patricia asks the chief to marry them. And he's just like, okay. Perfect. I love this chief. It's fantastic. Joe says he doesn't want to get married. And Patricia hits him with a beautiful line. She's like, what? Are you afraid of the commitment? You're going to have to love and honor me for like 30 seconds. Can you not handle that? Sarcasm on point. Like, let's go. And Joe's like, okay, I'll marry you. And then this is the greatest wedding I think I have ever seen personally in the entire time that I've done this show. I don't think like many of the films that I've watched have weddings in them. To be fair, this might be one of the first ones, but also just in general, it's a fantastic wedding scene. And this is how it goes down. The chief, you want to marry her? Yes. You want to marry him? Yes. You're married. Done. Simplest wedding of all time.
Yes, they should all be so efficient.
He was just like, again, this is why I love Chief Toby and why I want to play him. He's just done with everything. He's just like, I don't know, man. Just whatever. Can you just get on with it? Like, all right, great. You want to get married? Fine. Like, I'll marry you real quick. You can go jump into a volcano. Whatever. So, I literally have the note right after this scene. I was like, the chief is by far my favorite character in this entire film. Just
Yeah, that's
perfect
awesome.
comedic timing. He's not around for a long time, but he's here for a good time. So,
Yep.
and I was like, okay, cool. They thank the chief. The chief is just like, I'm going now. And then he heads out. And they kiss. Patricia tells Joe not to jump. And Joe says, these are my last words. I gotta be brave. I gotta jump. Goodbye. And then he gives her a pat on the shoulder and heads to the edge of the volcano. And I'm like, seriously, dude? You can't even like give her a kiss goodbye. She is your wife at this point. Like, I do more when I'm saying goodbye to my friends who I know that I'm gonna see like probably in like a week or two. Like, come on.
Yeah, that is a little awkward. Although, to your point earlier about him ever been in love before, you're confident he hasn't been. He doesn't. He probably hasn't had that many romantic experiences either.
No, he probably hasn't, and he probably like we don't see him have any friends in the film.
Right.
The only people that he's kind of friends with, I would say, are Dee Dee, who he's kind of friends with, but was always too scared to say anything to her. And so it's kind of like more like a work colleague. Angelica, who
Right.
he has known for a day, and now Patricia.
Right.
So very interesting. But he heads back up and Joe's at the edge, and then a fire suddenly appears, and I'm just like, there aren't flames like this inside of a volcano. This isn't how a
Sure.
volcano works. It has
And they
magma.
they couldn't even stand that close to it, without some special gear. It's like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, like, just as you approach it,
Oh,
something ridiculous.
yeah, no, like you would have melted at this point. Like,
Yep.
goodbye. The Big Woo would have claimed you. Let
Yes.
alone the other people on this mountain, the Will ponies. So Patricia comes up and says, "You're not the only one that gets to say last words." And Joe's like, "What?" And she's just like, "Well, I can't think of anything to say. I'm
Yeah, I
jumping
love
with
that.
you." Fair enough. I appreciate that they're just honest of like, I don't know what to say. Like, yeah, I don't have anything profound to say, but I'm jumping with you. Joe says, no, you're not. And she's like, whither thou goest, I go. And I was like, that's an interesting Shakespearean Victorian line of an attempt. I just kind of laughed at the line. And then Joe's like, you didn't sign up for it. And I was like, well, technically speaking, till death do us part. So, like, it is her decision.
Looking up whither thou goest. Huh, it seems to be lyrics from some songs, but I think it's probably got some other significance too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was curious on if it was a saying or not. I did not do the research to find out if it was a saying or
Yeah.
not. But yeah, I don't know. Well, there we go. Whither thou goest. So we then, see the two of them, and she's like, I'm not doing it for you. And the Big Woo gives a jolt, and they have to grab onto each other to steady themselves. And Patricia says, nobody knows anything. We'll take the jump, and we'll see that's life. We'll see what happens, And it's, as we've been saying kind of throughout the last two episodes, it's a beautiful metaphor. Like, you don't always know what's going to happen in life, but sometimes you have to take the jump and figure out what's going to happen. Might not always
Right.
work out, but sometimes you have to take a jump. You have to take a leap of faith. There's a reason that it's called a leap of faith. So this is where I have in the notes where I'm like, are they just going to jump in and then nothing's going to actually happen to them, and it's all just an act put on by the chief and, like, the strong-willed within his people kind of deal, and like they're actually going to end up being able to like live some life of luxury because there's some weird loophole that like shouldn't exist but exists, and like everything's going to be fine, and it's all just some big ploy by the chief actually just to be like, all right, who's the victor of our people and who gets to live in the lap of luxury for the years. Again, I have been forewarning this that I'm going to be very annoyed if it's plot armor. So Joe tells her that he saw the moon while they were on the ocean, shining down on everything. And he has been miserable for so long. Most of his life has been wasted, a long time coming to meet you. And, it was a long time, a crooked road, and asks if he told her that the first time he'd seen her, he felt like he'd seen her before. And I was like, well, you
Right.
have, because they cast one female to play 3 female parts.
Yeah.
And she did a fantastic job.
And he also had said that line to Dee Dee, too, if you remember, when he, I think they're at the restaurant, he says that to her. But yeah, that's probably obviously part of the fact that he cast the one actor, like, to give that idea that, yeah. And that, again, as I mentioned earlier, it does seem like there's this through line where each one of those is sort of an evolution from the prior one. And each one is almost like I don't know, it's a step in Joe's journey too, as he moves closer to, being able truly to connect with somebody, because the prior two women, for one reason or another, they don't have that connection, they don't click. The other thing I wanted to mention is he mentions that, he was on this crooked road, which is, again, it's that imagery that we've seen
the lightning
all
bolt
this time. Yeah.
There it
It's the
is.
shape of the literal path he's been taking. Yeah.
Nothing is straightforward, and maybe that's the reason that they chose that symbol, is because it's like, hey, nothing is straightforward. Sometimes you got to go down a crooked path, and you got to take these twists and turns, and you got to figure it out. It's not simple. No one ever said that life is simple and that it's easy, but through these paths you get to wherever the next step of your journey is supposed to be.
Maybe. I think I would only disagree because it's the logo for the company and the path of the company, which are things that, he needs to reject. And I think ultimately the volcano he needs to reject, except in a sense.
Fair.
I feel like more, and he says, I was on the crooked path. Now I had this vision with the moon. I'm on the straight and narrow in a sense that, and it's sort of this idea, I think, that he's getting, sort of, basically how you described on your hike. Now it exists for an important safe reason on the hike, but you can see what you want to go, but you keep getting taken away from it. And boy, this sucks. And it's easy to get on that sort of, rat races. I'm putting a lot of metaphors together, but rat in a maze, rat maze, and lose sight of that goal ultimately. Whereas again, every chance you get instead, just keep leaping towards it. I think that's more of the,
fair enough.
That's what I take from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Patricia says Joe isn't going anywhere without her. They kiss, and Joe asks, "What are we hoping for?" And she's like, "A miracle." And they try to hype themselves up. And then they take each other's hands and they jump into the volcano. And it shoots them out, and then they land safely in the water. What the hell?
Oh, yeah. Oh, so you are upset about the plot armor?
Yeah. I would have rather them just die. Think it would have been a more satisfying ending, personally. I mean, don't get me wrong. I knew it was coming. I knew they weren't gonna die. I just I don't know. I felt like, I understand why they did it, and I laughed at it, and it was still funny. But at the end of the day, for me, I just kind of wish that there was something else. I don't necessarily have the answer to it, but I don't know. But I don't know. It just annoyed me that the volcano is just like, nope, and just rejected them. I'm like, come on, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it is a miracle, and it is. Look, I dug into this movie. For me, is like a philosophy to live by, and unfortunately, like as I mentioned earlier, I haven't always lived that way. And in fact, I had seen Joe versus the Volcano when I decided to get on the crooked path again and just, have a job that's sucking the life out of me through fluorescent lights. So I haven't always lived that way, but it is a philosophy that I believe in. But that I think this notion that Joe accepts his mortality, and so does Patricia, that they're not afraid of dying. And even like you mentioned, she says, look, life is about leaping and seeing. She's not saying, look, we're going to leap or we'd be dead. She even thinks there's a chance they won't die, but we don't know. And it seems like once they accept their mortality, they're rewarded. Now, it's in this fantastical way, of course, that can only happen in a movie like this, but they're rewarded where, hey, no, now you get a chance to live. You've death is not looming over you anymore. give you a chance to actually live your life now.
Yeah, I mean,
Spit you out.
I do appreciate how the film ended and like the meaning behind it and all of that. I was just annoyed by plot armor, but like, go.
Yeah, well,
I was
I don't know.
legitimately
It's been so ridiculous, this whole movie, I think, and I don't know. For me, it felt like it wasn't inappropriate, I'd say.
No,
I
it
guess.
wasn't inappropriate by any means. It fits the film. It makes sense in the world of the film that this is something that can happen. Completely accept that.
I get you. I hear you.
So, and again, I knew that they weren't gonna die. I know that, they're not gonna die. You can't end the film. I just think it would be really funny if you just ended the film. Like,
Just died.
they jump in, credits roll. Like,
Yeah, smoke. Just a smoke comes out.
like I want to see that edit. Like, I just want to see that edit of the film. Like, I just think it would be super funny because like everyone's going in, like we've said, like they've broken some of these tropes of like you think it's gonna be this, it's not. It's you think it's gonna be this.
Yeah.
It's not like you think he's gonna follow people inside. No, he's not. Like you think he's gonna go in and like sleep with the girl. No, he's not. Like he's not gonna do that. Like he's not gonna do these tropes that like you see happen a lot in the films. So that's why I thought it would be funny if they jumped in and died, because it's like, great, we're breaking another trope.
Yeah.
Here we go.
And then Toby's like, he did it.
Like, great, we're alive. So it shoots them out. They didn't die. And they look at each other and they're like, why aren't we dead? And they're like, I don't know. And they realize that the volcano blew them out. And just like that, Waponi Wu starts to sink into the ocean. And Patricia's like, well, we lucked out. And Joe's like, yeah, well, yeah. And this is where I had the thought, and I was like, maybe their, thought in terms of Waponi Wu that like someone had to jump in wasn't wrong. Maybe it could have quelled, but maybe the reason that they rejected them was that it had to be a Waponi that jumped in and not somebody else.
Right.
Maybe that's the case.
Yeah. And then, again, the antithesis of Joe, ponies are scared to die, and it literally results in their undoing. They're scared to die, so then they do die.
They die. Bye. So Joe's like, well, I hate to bring this up, but we're 1,000,000 miles from anywhere, and we're gonna drown. And Patricia's like, no, we won't. And I was like, no, they won't. Plot armor will protect them again. And Patricia's like, nah, I don't know how, but we'll be fine. And just then, oh, look, the luggage pops out. And the luggage ex machina once again. And just pops out from under the water. And I'm like, and she's like, see? And even Joe at this point is like, how do you do that? Like, even Joe is confused on what is happening. He's just like, what? And she's like, I don't know. Accept the gift. So they're on the water, and Patricia's like, isn't this romantic? Who gets a honeymoon like this? And Joe's like, yeah, but there's still a problem. And he explains that he has a brain cloud to Patricia. And then Joe's like, maybe I should get a second opinion. And Patricia jokingly kind of just says, you didn't get a second opinion for something called a brain cloud? What are you, a hypochondriac? And I was like, thank you. Someone pointed out the obvious. And Joe's like, well, I was, but Dr. Ellison told me that I had a brain cloud. And so she's like, so some quack. And then Patricia clocks that he said Dr. Ellison. And she's like, wait a minute. That's my father's doctor. And Dr. Ellison doesn't have any other patients. Her father owns Dr. Ellison. And I was like, in all caps, was the whole thing a goddamn setup? Also, how dumb does Joe have to be to go to a doctor where there are no other patients going to that doctor? Does he not take references of the doctor he should maybe go see?
Oh, well, like you mentioned, he doesn't have any friends. Like, who would he ask? I guess, or are you saying, like, does he ask the doctor, can you give me a reference? And they're like, no.
Right.
Well, this one guy.
But, like, also, how did he find Dr. Ellison?
Yeah, that's a little fuzzy, yeah.
Like, questions. I don't know. I mean, like questions that'll never be answered. But if I ever
Yeah.
have, someone who has written one of these films or acted in one of these films on the show, and I'm interviewing them like about the films that they're in, these are the questions that I'm asking. Like it's just like, hey, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Three things. One, was the cat praying for food? What's going on with
Yeah.
the little cat? Two, why the duck? Why was the
Yeah.
duck important on the luggage? And three, how did he meet Dr. Ellison? How did he get to
Yeah.
that position? Everything else that happens past that, sure, agreeable,
Yeah.
fine. How did he find Dr. Ellison?
I think their answer would be, "Oh, I didn't remember we did any of those things." Is that right? Oh,
I mean, fair enough. I mean, this film came out in 1990 and was filmed in the
yeah.
80s. So, like, yeah, fair. It's been
Mm,
a bit. So, just a little bit. So, Patricia realizes that her father set him up. And Joe is
right.
pissed. And he's like, wait, so I don't have a brain cloud? And Patricia is aghast, saying, really? You couldn't figure something out? Like something better than a brain cloud? Like, come on. Like, she's like upset with Dr. Ellison and her father. She's like, come on, guys. Like, if you're gonna make up a fake thing, like, at least be better than a brain cloud.
Right. Mm,
So Joe says that his whole life he's been a victim, a dupe, a pawn. His throat is starting to close up. And Patricia's like, no, Joe, your whole life is ahead of you. And he's like, true, it's good news. And Joe is relieved. He is happy. And then he goes, but, and I hate to bring this up, we're on a raft, no land in sight. I don't know. And Patricia's like, it's always going to be something with you, isn't it, Joe? And he's like, yeah. But Joe then says, you know what? Wherever we go, whatever we do, we're taking this luggage with us. And I was like, as you should. It is the strongest plot armor I have seen in a very long time. It is very effective. You cannot leave this luggage behind. It has saved your life twice.
I told you that how important this movie is to me, and being one of those tests for a potential mate eventually. And the woman I married loves this movie, and so I knew she was the one. But we have this collage of we have this artist made for us this collage of different things from our lives when we early on in our relationship, and one of them is that quote is sort of hidden in the collage. Wherever we go, whatever we do, we're going to take this luggage with us.
That's a beautiful quote. I love that. That's really beautiful. So they kiss and they wonder, where will we end up? And then they say, away from the things of man. We pan up to the full moon. An end card pops up reading, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Round of applause for this film.
Yeah.
Fantastic film. I really did enjoy it. It was very, very fun. So it came out in March of 1990. So as we've been alluding, like if it's releasing in March, it's going to be filmed in the 80s. I think 88, 89, I would probably assume. And then, production after that, depending on when filming and everything happened. So it was filmed in the late 80s, is my guess. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this film. It was very fun. It is just a fun time. I really enjoyed it. Like, there are moments where I'm like, what? But then, like, if you're going in and you're expecting to watch a masterpiece, no, like you're not getting something that's the level of Shawshank Redemption, Silence of the Lambs. Like you're not watching Schindler's List, like, which I haven't seen, but like you're not watching something of that gravitas. But then if you're like, I want to watch a fun film, and a good fun film that I can enjoy, and it's a comedy and I can laugh, and as we have pieced together in these two episodes, there's a lot that you can take from this film on just philosophy of life, philosophy of different things. And, there's a lot that you can read into this film without necessarily intending to. And I like that it's subtle. It's not like blatantly in your face, like, this is what we're telling you to do. But it's just like, hey, here's the information. You can interpret it how you would like. If you just want this to be a very fun film and a silly film, we got that. If you want this to have a bit more of a meaning for your life, we have that. You want a bit of like drama and suspense, we have that. Like it hits all the different elements, and I really enjoyed it. So, a few facts about the film in terms of ratings, and then we'll give our ratings of the film as well. I have a guess of what yours might be. But IMDb is a 5.9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes audience score is a 54%, and Rotten Tomatoes critic score is 67%. Now, Will, before I give my rating for what
Yeah.
the film is, what is yours? I have a guess, but I don't want to assume.
Yeah. What scale are we talking about here?
I would just say 1 out of 10. Like, we'll just stick with IMDb
Okay.
scales, and like you can do
Yeah.
points, and like, if you want to do like, 3.2, which I highly doubt that's the number you're about to give, but
No,
like,
yeah, you're right. It's simple for me. It is 10. I do think for all the reasons we discussed, it's a 10. The writing, the directing, the look of it, even as cheesy at times as it is, it feels like a small romantic fantasy film with, I think, a good heart and good performances, and for all those reasons, yeah, it's a near. Look, I'm going to say it's a near perfect film because, as you pointed out, there's films that are a little tighter in different ways, but the emotional sort of content of it and the way it sort of I connect with it overcomes those gaps. That's why I would give it a full 10.
Yeah, beautiful. And like, yeah, that's the beauty of films, television. Like, I can have a different opinion than you can. Like, there are so many films that I've seen where I'm like, I really enjoyed this film. This was a very fun film. Like, I might not give it a 10 out of 10, but I'd be like, oh, like, this was a really fun film. Like, I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. And then I'll look at like the IMDb or something because I'm like curious, and like, I'll read up a little bit on the film after watching it, and it'll be like 2.6, and I'm like, what? Like, how?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So like, completely fair.
Yeah.
I would give this probably like an 8.5, 8.7, roughly there. And I think it's a very enjoyable film. I think, as we were saying, it has a lot of emotional connection if you're looking for that. But then also, like, I just really enjoyed the film. It was fun, it was silly, comedic, and like, yeah, like, I don't think it's necessarily a full 10 for me, but like, it's still a very enjoyable film. It's a film that, like, now that I've seen it once, it's a film that I would definitely like go back and watch again. Like, I don't necessarily always do that with films that I've done for this show, but this is one of those films, like, probably not right away, but like, 6, 8 months down the line, I might be like, hey, you know what? Like, I want to show this to my parents. I think they'll enjoy it. Or like, I'm going to show this to like my friends. I think they'll enjoy it. Or like, whatever. Like, even a random Tuesday, it's like, kind of want to watch a film, but I don't want to watch anything new. I kind of want to laugh. Let's watch this. Like, it's a very enjoyable film for me. So yeah, I'd give it probably like an 8.5, 8.7, roughly in that range. So
I get that.
yeah. A couple other quick facts about this film. It was nominated for one award. It didn't win, but it was nominated for the 2020 awards for Best Art Direction for Bo Welch. He was a 2011 nominee. This is all the information I could find on the 2020 awards. I have no idea what this is. I clicked on IMDb and I was like, learn more, and it didn't give me anything. So like, I don't even know what this awards is. I just thought it was funny, so I thought I'd include it here.
Yeah, so in 2020, they're giving out awards for a film that's what, 30 years old?
No,
by that
but it was a
point?
2011 nominee, but the awards were called 20/20, like 2020 Vision.
Oh, like Vision.
So
Okay.
like,
Oh, all right. That makes.
yeah.
But even still, 2011, and the movie is. Okay,
I don't know. I'm just as baffled as you are.
I have more questions about that than the movie.
Yeah, right. It's like, who are these people? Like, what are you doing? What's happening? They're the people that I need on this podcast to interview about questions. So the budget of this film was $25 million, which I will say is more than I thought it was going to be. I thought the budget was going to be around like 10 to 15 million. But Fair enough. You had a lot of actors, you had a lot of extras. I'm sure a good chunk of that money probably did go to production, because you had a lot of different sets, you had a lot of different design moments, and you had a lot, some things were filmed on location, as you could tell. So like, you had all of those cuts, and also you had two very big actors at the time. Like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is still, like, Tom Hanks is well known, but it's still kind of like the earlier part of his illustrious career.
Yeah, he's not the Academy Award winning Tom Hanks yet, but there's certainly been signs of his talent by now. But and again, he's been sort of, for the most part, with the exception of this film, and I think Punchline was another film he did, where a little more serious character. This is, somewhat comedic still, but yeah, he's not what he's going to be yet.
Yeah, so he's not fully Academy Award winning Tom Hanks, but he still can bring in people to a film.
Oh, sure.
So, and as you mentioned earlier, Meg Ryan at this moment is the it girl in Hollywood. So, and also she delivers a beautiful performance portraying 3 different roles. So like, she probably get a good chunk. I don't know how much people got paid, but like, yeah, I was surprised that the budget was as high as it was, but sometimes that's how it is. However, I'm surprised the box office didn't do that well. The box office was 39.4 million US dollars.
Yeah, I think it's like I mentioned to you. What I recall is that folks felt tricked, and so probably bad word of mouth killed it. I was talking about things that surprised us about the film. I was surprised that it opened in I think it was number 2, just behind The Hunt for Red October, which is Hunt for Red October becomes this massive, movie. And I was surprised it ranked that high even. But to your point about Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, people went to see it because it was them. They just trusted what they did. But I do think the audiences, again, this is somewhat anecdotal, but I do recall reading this and certainly experiencing it. People felt tricked because the marketing was for one thing and the film was something different. Maybe if they knew more like what they were getting into, which would be a hard thing to, I think, show you in 30 seconds, maybe give you a vibe. But if they marketed it more along the lines of what they really got, maybe there wouldn't have been maybe bad word of mouth.
Fair enough. I mean, they probably made their money back. They didn't maybe make much more than that because, you have advertising costs and the theaters take a cut and everything. So like, they definitely made their money back, maybe made a bit of a profit, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't a flop because I consider a flop something that doesn't make its money back.
Okay.
So
right.
At least I don't know if that's technically the term for, a flop. They might consider this a box office flop, but it wasn't like it didn't equal the money. And then like there was some, they still made another 14.4 million over the budget, which is not a small number. So like, regardless of advertising costs and regardless of how much of a cut the theaters took, in 14.4 million, you're gonna see some type of profit. But yeah, that's this film, Joe versus the Volcano. I was, blown away by it. Didn't know what to expect. You don't know this, Will, but in the very first episode, I mentioned the only thing I know about this film was Tom Hanks is in it, and that's because he was on the poster when I looked up where to watch the film.
Right.
So I knew nothing going into it, was very pleasantly surprised, had an absolute blast talking with you about it. Thank you so much. If people want to find your work and you online, how can they do that? Where can listeners go to find your show?
Yeah, sure. If you like more conversation in particular about 1980s pop culture, you can find my show 1980s Now on any podcast platform, on our YouTube and Facebook as well.
Wonderful. And listeners, will be sure to link it down in the description of this episode as well. But Will, thank you so much for joining and taking your time out to talk about this film. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And until next week, when we start talking about The Shining, I'll catch y'all later. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of Post Finale. Post Finale is created, hosted, and produced by me, Ankit Madhira. Our editor is Pranav Nair. The music is by Ankit Madhira and Megan Hutcherson, and the art is by Jarid Rother. If you are all enjoying this episode and want to gain access to more bonus content, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/coopforge and signing up for any of the tiers. You get loads of different bonus content, such as notes and commentary that we have as we're watching the films, as well as some bonus audio, some bonus videos, and ad-free episodes, early access if we get them done early, and different things like that. All of that can be found at patreon.com/coopforge, and that's patreon.com/co_opforge. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, that's great as well. Tell a friend about the show. Just reach out and be like, hey, you love films, or hey, you need an excuse to watch some more films. Check out the show called Post Finale. The host is an actor, and he's funny and silly, confused most of the time, but they have interesting discussions about some popular films that I think you would really enjoy. It really does help us out a lot. Be sure to talk about us on social media at Post Finale Pod on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also follow us at Co-op that's CO_OPFORGE on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And there we post content not just from Post Finale, but also from the other shows hosted here on Co-op Forge, which are Flip the Scripts and Seattle Across the Pond. So a lot of fun things can be found over there on our social media. It really, really does help us out a lot. Thank you to everyone who has already done this. Thank you to everyone who will do this in the future. It really does mean a lot to us, and it helps us create better content for you, the listeners, as we grow. It really does help, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of Post Finale, and I can't wait until next week. And until then, I'll catch y'all later.